The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical psychology for today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, narrated by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from Seeker After Truth by Idries Shah. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation. Part 1. Tales of the Classical Masters. Praying for Rain. It is recounted among the wise that there was once a great drought at Qasr al-Arifin, and the people went to the master Bahuddin Naqshband, asking him to pray, to ask God for rain. He led them through the streets until he came to a place where a woman sat, nursing a small baby in her arms. "I beg of you to feed that infant," said the master. "I know when to feed the child," said the woman, "as I am his mother. Why do you concern yourself with things which are disposed of in a manner whereof you know nothing?" Bahuddin had the woman's words written down and read out to the crowd. The one without the other. It is recorded that a man went to Ahmad Yasavi, the Sufi master of Turkestan, and said, "Teach me without books, and let me learn to understand without the intervention of a master between me and truth, for humans are frail, and reading books does not enlighten me." Yasavi said, "Do you seek to eat without a mouth, or to digest without a stomach? Perhaps you would like to walk without feet and buy without paying. I could do as you ask only if you could first dispense with physical organs, as you wish to avoid those things which have been devised for the spiritual organs. Just think for a moment whether you could use food without an apparatus, approach the Sufis without having heard of them in the words you so dislike, desire wisdom without a source appropriate to your state. It may be an amusing pastime to think of learning without books as a basis, and experiencing without a teacher. So is it an amusing pastime to think of magic and miracles? Aside from the amusement, what of the permanent yield of the activity? The disobedience of Moses. According to Abu Talib Maki, Moses related tales of how he learnt to widen his understanding, from narrow assumptions to correct perspective. Moses was ill, and he was offered various remedies to treat the sickness. But he refused, saying that God would help him instead. But God, it is related, commanded Moses to use medicines, saying, "By refusing to accept the mission of the medicine, you have called into question the wisdom of him who endowed the remedies with their virtue." It is for this reason that there is a saying, "Trust in God and tie your camel." If you are expected to do nothing, why is there such a thing as a camel hobble? Hadrat Bahuddin Naqshband of Bukhara has said in this connection, "If a withering leaf says by its appearance that it needs water, and because you have the power to provide it, you also have the duty to do so, these words of the leaf are the manifestation of the command of the creator of the leaf, and are addressed to you. If you insist upon a personal command from the originator, ask why the means of communication has been placed before you. Is it there for you to neglect?" Sting into remedy. There were once two grandees in the city of Bistam who disliked one another because of some ancient rivalry. Both of them, as it happened, also wanted to study the secrets of man's origins and destiny under the renowned man of wisdom, Ali Beg, whose home was in a distant part of Persia. But Ali, before seeing them, wrote to another sage, Ibn Hamza, who lived near Bistam, and asked him to speak to them on his behalf. But each refused to see Ibn Hamza. The first grandee said, "I want the root, not the branch." The second said, "Ibn Hamza is a nobody." Now Ibn Hamza began to spread scurrilous rumours about the two would-be illuminates. After some months, hearing venomous tales about themselves from all sides, and having traced them to Ibn Hamza, the two aristocrats felt mutually assailed, became reconciled to one another, united in their anger against Ibn Hamza, and went to see him full of fury. They stormed and raged at Ibn Hamza, completely forgetting every single counsel of wisdom which they had heard throughout their lives up to that time. "Do you know why we have come to see you, despicable wretch?" they screamed, as soon as they entered Ibn Hamza's presence. "Yes, indeed I do," answered Ibn Hamza. "You have come, firstly, because Ali Beg wanted to demonstrate how fundamentally shallow your deep feelings of mutual enmity are. Secondly, because you are required to show that your superficial feelings could easily be manipulated to make you come here, even though you had individually made up your minds at first not to do so. Thirdly, because although disobedient to Ali Beg's orders, you could be shown that certain desires must be carried out. Fourthly, you are here so that the other people present at this moment can learn, and you can be their unwitting teacher in this transaction. Fifthly, because both Ali Beg and I had need of showing the poisonous local populace, riddled with suspicion and delighted at spreading rumours such as the ones which I initiated about you too, that we men of the heart are not their inevitable victims, but that we may also know how to employ their harmful actions against their harmfulness itself. Sixthly, you are here because, as a consequence of the foregoing events, facts, and explanations, there is a prospect of transforming a sting into a remedy, and a weapon into an instrument of value. Weapons. Hakim al-Mansuri was a great sage of Balkh in Central Asia. He had thousands of disciples, and his mere presence at the courts of kings was regarded as conferring legitimacy upon their rule. But he very seldom spoke. When he did, it was about matters which did not seem to be connected with spiritual concerns. And yet many great masters of the Sufi way attribute their attainments to having sat at his table, or from being in his guest house, or even from associating with the other disciples, or working in his house. One day, the Hakim was challenged by a famous preacher to dispute with him on matters of philosophy. The preacher claimed that al-Mansuri knew nothing about wisdom and spoke very little on weighty matters because he was ignorant of them. Al-Mansuri set out for Herat, where the challenger, Qari Mukhtar, taught at a famous college. Each of the disputants was attended by hundreds of students who had assembled, together with a multitude of townsfolk, to witness the duel of these giants. The Qari, as the challenger, began his tirade with a carefully thought-out sentence, obviously preparing to launch a full-scale attack. Then suddenly, after less than a minute, the Hakim stood up and pointed his finger at the Qari, who stood like stone, abruptly ceasing to speak. Then he fled from the hall. On the way home, one of the disciples said to his master, who had been cheered to the echo by the delighted audience, "Why did you choose to throw paralysis upon that man, instead of refuting his arguments?" The Hakim answered, "If you have a sword in your hand, do you charge the opponent with mud bricks? Even a monkey would not chatter if it could do something more effective. That man wanted to defeat me, not to discover truth." Elephant meat. Ibrahim Khwas, or Abu Ishaq Ibrahim ibn Ahmad al-Khwas, the palm weaver, died in 910 of the Christian era. He was an associate of Junayd of Baghdad and of Nuri. Khawas's name is associated with teaching narratives which are understood at the ordinary level and also lead to deeper understanding of man. The present story is preserved in al-Tanuki's book Al-Faraj Ba'd al-Shida, written in the 10th century, whose name may be translated as release after hardship. The story exemplifies just this, and although placed in a travel tale frame, it is allegorical of the right and wrong ways to approach, and also to assess, human development and intention. Ibrahim Khwas relates this instruction narrative, which has been used to test the understanding of students of Sufism. In company with a number of Sufis, I was making a journey on shipboard when we were wrecked, and I found myself with some others just able to reach a desolate shore. We did not know where we were, neither did we have any food. It seemed that we would be likely to perish as days passed without any sign of succor. We discussed the position and decided that each of us would make a vow to do some good, or to abandon some evil which cut him off from his Lord. In this way, we thought, the exercise of sincerity might be the means of providing escape from helplessness. Each one made his oath, one that from now on he would carry out fasting, another one that he would pray so many times each day, and yet another one that he would carry out pilgrimages on foot. Everyone in this way made his declaration and compact that he would abstain from some indulgence, or else that he would do something of religious worth. Now it came to me to declare my vow, and I was asked by the others to speak. I wanted to make my promise, and it came into my mind without any thought or consideration that I would say, I shall not eat any elephant meat. The others exclaimed, This is no time for joking and amusement, no time for such things, as we remain in this danger of death. I answered, By God, I did not say this in the spirit you mention. While you were talking, I thought over all the possible good actions I might do, and all the bad things I might avoid, and something prevented me from choosing one of them. And what I have just said simply came to me without any reflection, and I said it. It is possible that some divine wisdom has put the idea into my head, and has allowed me to speak in this way. The party then decided to explore further into the land where they were cast, to look for food. After arranging for a central point at which to reassemble, and that anything found should be shared, they started their search. They had not gone far when my friends found a young elephant and decided that they could survive if they killed it to eat. The animal was slaughtered, and the meat was cooked over a fire. Although they asked me to share the food, I was unable to do so, and I answered, You are all witnesses that I have made the vow to abstain from this very thing, and I cannot break that oath. It may even be that God has caused me to think of this particular vow so that I might die. In any case, it is unlawful to break my oath. After eating, everyone lay down to sleep, and soon we heard the trumpeting of an infuriated elephant bearing down upon us. The noise was so great that the earth shook, and all were terrified. Since it seemed obvious that everyone was to be killed, they gave up hope, and murmured their confession of faith, as people do when faced by death. Now the elephant, when he reached us, extended his trunk to each traveller in turn, smelling him. One by one, as he smelt the odour of roast elephant meat, he stamped the man to death, until he came to me. I lay on the ground, repeating my shahada, or confession, in mortal terror. the elephant smelt me again and again, not as hastily as he had done with the others. Then he caught me up in his trunk, and I imagined that he was going to kill me in some way different from the others. But he placed me on his back, where I sat, and started to move away, sometimes walking, sometimes running, covering a long distance. I was extremely uncomfortable on the animal's back, yet I began to think that perhaps I might be able in some way to escape. It was dawn when the elephant took me down and placed me on the earth, running off in the direction from which we had come. I could not understand the reason for his actions and was still in fear. But eventually he vanished over the horizon. Giving thanks for my deliverance, I offered prayers and thanks to the Lord, and when I felt the heat of the day, I looked up and realized that I was beside a broad highway. I went along the road, and after some time came to a populous city, where I related all that had happened to the people, who were most surprised and said that it was a distance of ordinarily several days from which the elephant had brought me. After spending some time in that city and recovering from my exhaustion, I was able to return to my own land in safety and health. Generosity. The great teacher Sal of Tustar relates that God told Moses that real self-sacrifice for the sake of others is the basis of the greatest capacity for perception of the divine, the extreme self-sacrifice which was given to Muhammad and his followers. Imam Ghazali relates, in the third book of his Revival of Religious Sciences, how a man who was famed as generous learnt what generosity really was. The Black Slave and the Dog. Abdullah ibn Jafar owned an orchard and went one day to visit it. He passed through a vineyard where he saw a black slave sitting, with some bread in front of him and a dog nearby. As Abdullah watched, the slave took a piece of the bread and threw it to the dog, which ate it. Then he gave it another piece, and another. Abdullah asked, "How much bread are you given every day?" The slave answered, "That quantity which you have just seen eaten by the dog." "Why," Abdullah asked, "do you give it to a dog, instead of attending first to your own need?" "There are no dogs hereabouts," said the black man, "and this one has come from a great distance and is hungry. Because of this, I did not desire to eat my bread." "But how will you manage for food today?" asked the generous Abdullah. "I shall endure the hunger," said the black. Abdullah thought, "I am the one who has the reputation for generosity, and yet this slave is more philanthropic." He bought the vineyard and gave it to the slave, also buying his freedom and releasing him. Grouping. There was once a king who visited the sage Bahuddin Naqshband, the designer, and sat observing his assembly. Afterwards, when they were eating, the king said, "Teacher of the age, your disciples, when you are in session, are ranged in semicircles and in an orderly manner very similar to that of my own court. Is there any significance in this?" Bahuddin answered, "King of the world, how are your own courtiers stationed? Tell me, and I shall describe the ordering of the ranks of the seekers." "The first arc," said the king, "is composed of those who are in especial favor with me, so that they are nearest. The second array comprises the most important and powerful people in the realm, and the ambassadors. The outer rank is for all the lesser ones." "In that case," said the Shah, "our marshalling of the people is far from the intention expressed by you. Those nearest to me are the deaf, so that they shall hear. The middle group is composed of the ignorant, so that they may pay attention to the teaching. Farthest away are the enlightened, for whom proximity of this kind is unimportant. This podcast is copyright 2018, the Idries Shah Foundation.